So we're prepping for the very first fishing trip of the year, and I have my tackle bag loaded. We're not taking the Champion. I'm actually going out with my buddy Jacob Williamson for largemouth. Now for me, going out and chasing largemouth is actually easier ice out than smallmouth because smallmouth tend to roam, they get nomadic, they tend to be in the middle of the lake just kind of hanging out under bait fish. These largemouth are going to push shallow. You're going to be able to fish pretty much aggressive techniques for the most part to get these fish to bite. So today's video, I'm going to quickly break down my top 5 early spring cold water techniques for largemouth bass and share with you guys a couple baits that are probably expected and definitely one that flies under the radar, at least up here in the north. So we're going to dive into these top 5 baits, the baits that I use and why I use them for chasing early spring cold water largemouth bass. So the first bait that I'm going to have rigged up, and this is going to be on the deck of my boat anytime I'm largemouth fishing, spring, summer, winter, fall, is going to be a 1/2 ounce jig. Now this is a Beast Coast Little Magnum. It's a 1/2 ounce size, and then I have the Excite Bait Suck-A-Punch rigged up on the back. Now one of the big things about largemouth this time of year is they're keyed in very heavily on bluegill. Bluegill are a huge forage type up here in the Midwest, up here in Michigan, that these largemouth key in on, especially early season. So a big bluegill jig is going to be a great way to start the year. Now, if the water's off color, I might go to a June bug or toxic bug, something with a little bit more purple or black and blue in the skirt to help it silhouette and stand out a little bit more. But I'm going to start out with that Magic Craw rigged up and then some sort of green pumpkin style trailer. Now the rod that I'm rigging this up on is a TFO Tactical Elite 7.5 heavy, and then high-speed gear ratio 7-speed reel with 20-pound test fluorocarbon line. The benefit of a jig is how versatile you can be with that technique. Now I'm not thinking these fish are going to be moving super fast. I mean, the water is still very cold. We're just ice out. So you can fish a jig and you can really soak it on pieces of cover, isolated targets, which is really nice. Or you can fish that bait a little bit more aggressively to get those fish to bite depending on their mood. So bait number 1 is going to be a 1/2 ounce flipping jig. Bait number 2 is another cold water staple, a bait that you have to have rigged up anytime you're fishing in cold water, and that is a jerk bait. Now this is a Berkley Stunna 112. It's a regular diving model, and the reason I'm picking this one is because I'm anticipating these fish to be pushed up on that shallow flat in that warming water. 5 to 12 foot of water, these fish are pushing up. And if they do push off the break, I can fish a little bit deeper style jerk bait. And the one nice thing about the Stunna is that it does sink. So that perch color is a really good bait fish imitator. Again, bluegill feeders, perch feeders, these bait fish types of forage that we have up here in the north. The other nice thing about a jerkbait is that you can control how fast it sinks and whether it suspends by changing the hooks, by changing the lines. You can really have a ton of control over this bait, as well as fish it as slow or as fast as you want it. You're going to see a theme with these techniques where you really have a lot of control over the way you fish that bait, depending on the mood of the fish. But a jerkbait is pretty much a staple, and one that, quite frankly, I hope I don't have to throw tomorrow, because what seems to happen every year is once the jerkbait bite starts, it continues all the way through the spring, and then you're just stuck throwing a jerkbait every single trip out. It's a lot of fun, but it gets monotonous pretty quickly. The rod that I'm throwing that on is a Tactical Elite 7-foot medium. Again, it's a 7-foot rod. It's a little bit longer rod. It's going to let me get that bait away from the boat, but then it bends into the blank, so it really loads up on these fish when they do eat it a long ways away. It's a really short handle on it as well, which is something I really like. And then I'm throwing it on 10-pound test fluorocarbon line, high-speed gear ratio reel again. Now, I'm not going to say that bait 4 is unique, but I just posted a poll on my Instagram asking, would you rather fish a chatterbait or a swim jig? And I was a little bit surprised to see that there were a lot of guys that still love throwing a swim jig. I am one of those guys. I love to throw a swim jig, especially in the spring when I'm fishing isolated pieces of cover or isolated grass patches. A swim jig is a really effective tool to do that. Now this is a Beast Coast Working Man compact swim jig. It's really small style swim jig. It's 5/16 of an ounce, and you can really fish this slowly and methodically. The way that I'm going to fish this swim jig is make a long cast to an isolated target. Then I'm going to slowly turn that reel handle and get this bait just kind of creeping through the water. Another thing that's going to help with that is this craw style trailer. Now this is the Hatchet Craw from Do It Molds. I actually poured a bunch of these. And what I like about this trailer is that it has that kind of kicking motion, and it's going to help give that bait some lift. So even though you're fishing it super slow, it's going to kind of stay up in the water column. So you can be really precise, and you can control the speed of this bait based on the trailer that you put on the back of that. Now, if these fish become really, really active and aggressive, I can go to a swim bait style trailer that's going to allow me to get that bait a little bit deeper. But to start, and for the most part, I really like throwing a cross style trailer on the back of my swim jig in the spring. Now, this color here is actually, oh man, I wish I knew what this color was called. I have this link down in the description below, but this is actually, I believe, called Dirty Money. This is a really, really good swim jig color. It's a black and blue with green pumpkin mix, and then one of the real keys is that flash. Anytime I'm fishing a swim jig, I want that flash in the bait, and Beast Coast comes with a tied and banded skirt, so that skirt's not going to move, and that flash is in their swim jigs, which I really, really like. And it also has those really big eyes, giant eyes. I'm a big believer in eyes as well. The rod that I'm throwing that on is a TFO Option Bass. It's one of their newer series. It's a 7.3 medium heavy. Medium heavy to drive that hook home, 7.3 to get that bait away from the boat, and then I'm fishing it on a moderate speed gear ratio, 6-speed reel with 14-pound test fluorocarbon. That 14-pound is kind of my happy medium. I'm not fishing really heavy vegetation or cover, so that 14-pound lets that bait sink, get down to where I want it to be, but still gives me the power to move that fish when I need to. Now, this is a bait you guys probably recognize just by the sound alone, but it is a rattle trap. And when I say rattle trap, I mean it is a Bill Lewis rattle trap. It is in Candy Craw. This is probably one of my favorite springtime colors. It's a reddish color, but then it has that purple hue in the back. If you guys want to pick this up, it's actually on sale at Omnia. So I'll have all those products linked down in the description below. But this is one of the few colors that they actually have on sale, which kind of shocks me. Like, this is my favorite springtime lipless crankbait. The reason that I like this over other lipless crankbaits is how well it comes through grass. So when I'm fishing a lipless, I'm either fishing it, pulling it through grass, ripping it through grass, or I'm fishing it slow, low along the bottom. The other nice thing about a rattle trap is how squared off that nose is, and as you guys can see, I've fished this one a ton. What's nice about that squared off nose, it acts almost like a square bill, so when you're dragging this bait and fishing it slowly along the bottom, that nose will kind of come in head first and help this bait deflect off cover or wood or other different pieces of debris along the bottom. So 1/2 ounce Bill Lewis OG rattle trap is a bait that I've tied on for largemouth in the spring. Then a rod I have this on right now is a TFO Taction. It's a 7.3 medium. So it's a little bit different than what I've thrown my lipless on in the past, which is a composite rod. I'm playing with this. I watched Mikey throw his lipless on a 7.3 medium, and that's really where I got the idea from. And there's a couple other guys that really like throwing it on a 7.3 medium. So that's what I'm going to be trying out when I go out and throw the lipless this spring. And then I'm throwing it on a 7-speed gear ratio reel. That just lets me pick up that bait, pick up the line really quickly when that fish eats the bait and comes to me. And then I believe it's 16-pound or 14-pound test fluorocarbon. The key there is just having line that's durable enough to not only come through cover, but kind of not have too much stretch when I go to rip it free from the grass. Because that's a really effective technique this time of year. You basically let this bait start to bog down in the grass, and then you pop it free. And when it does that, your bait shoots forward, and that's when you're going to trigger a lot of those bites. So you're going to reel it at a medium cadence. You're going to kind of let that bait fall on the grass, nose first, and then you rip that bait free, and that's when you get a lot of your bites. And that's why a lipless crankbait is so effective in the spring, getting reaction bites from lethargic bass that are in that grass, basically warming themselves. And now I'm going to share with you guys my secret technique. And this is a technique that I've talked about quite a bit on this channel, especially early on when I was largemouth fishing quite a bit. But it's something that doesn't seem to have caught on up here in the north. So if you guys are fishing up here in Michigan or in the Midwest, this is a bait or a technique that I haven't really seen catch on the way it has, like down in Texas, in Gunnersville, in Grand Lake. These guys are really adopting it down there. In fact, the bait that I'm going to show you guys is a bestseller on Omnia, and not a whole lot of guys are talking about it up here in the Midwest. So hopefully it can give you guys an edge when you go out to fish. But that is an L-bill crankbait. So what makes this bait so unique is the bill style that it has on there. Now, there's a couple different models or styles of this crankbait out there. The Strike King Hybrid Hunter is the newest, developed by Todd Castledine with Strike King, which is actually an old Strike Pro bait. But I have caught like dumb amounts of fish on this bait, and it seems like for me this is a cold water approach. Like after those fish get up around bed, they don't want to eat this bait as effectively. It is a big body presentation. It's really, really loud and it's aggressive, but that L-bill keeps this bait horizontal when you're retrieving it through the water. So like I mentioned, these fish are keyed in on bluegill this time of year. This is a great bluegill imitation, and something about this presentation makes these fish go nuts over this bait. The way they eat this bait is kind of like nothing I've ever seen before. Like you'll get this entire bait deep inside of their mouth pretty much every single time they bite it. So if you guys haven't picked up an L-bill style crankbait, whether it's the Strike King Hybrid Hunter or this is a 6 cent swank, like a super old custom painted bluegill color, go pick one up. Go pick one up, especially for this spring, and try it out because it gets a lot of big bites. If you guys actually want to see this bait in action, I'll leave a link down to a video where I go and throw this in the spring for big bluegill eaters, and you'll see the way they eat this bait. I have multiple videos from very early on in my YouTube life throwing this thing and catching big fish. It's got a bunch of teeth mark. It's a really, really effective presentation. Now, where I'm going to throw this bait is the same place I throw that lipless, the same place I throw that swim jig, in 3 to 5 foot of water, anywhere that there's isolated cover, and you can really cover a lot of water with this technique. One of the biggest deals with this is it is very heavy. So this one is one of the early models. I think it's pretty close to an ounce. So you can bomb this bait away from the boat. And then because it has that L-bill, it gets down to depth and swims extremely horizontally. So these hooks hang down below that L-bill and they'll grab the grass. When these hooks grab the grass, you're going to pop that bait free. So it's going to kind of shoot forward, and that's when you're going to get a lot of those bites. It's okay around wood as well. Like if you have isolated pieces of wood or isolated stumps in the water, you might hang it a little bit. But if you pop that bait free and you get this bait to come loose from that wood, you're going to trigger a lot of fish to bite. So pick up an L-bill. And I'm saying this as a real piece of advice for you guys that are looking to catch big fish this spring. Cold water, this is probably one of my favorite techniques to catch them. It's an aggressive bite. You can cast it a long way. You can reel it relatively quickly. It's like a moderate cadence, the same way you'd fish a lipless crankbait. But for some reason, this bait catches really, really big fish. Now, the rod that I'm throwing this on is a TFO Taction. It's a 7.4 moving bait rod. So it's a 7.4 medium heavy, and they call it like a moderate fast. So it's going to bend deeper into the blank. For me, that's really important, especially with these moving baits, is having something that's going to bend deeper into the blank to help these fish stay pinned, especially on a heavy bait like this. You need that rod to have a little bit of forgiveness to help you keep those fish pinned. Then I'm throwing it on 16-pound test fluorocarbon line and an old Lew's BB1 Pro 6-speed gear ratio reel. That's the setup. Big spool capacity reel, 16-pound test fluorocarbon, and some sort of cranking rod, whether it's a composite or whether it's a graphite medium heavy rod. That's what I'm going to be going with, and that's what's going to catch a bunch of big fish. Now I'm pretty much packed. The bag's packed. I got a bunch of jigs, a bunch of trailers, a bunch of different jerk baits. I have some other chatter baits and other techniques that I might pick up if things get tough. But I'm really, really excited to go out fishing tomorrow. It's the first trip of the year, largemouth fishing, going to a small body of water where fish should be pushing up on the shallow pieces of cover that are out there. But if you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys learned something, go down and give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Stay tuned for that fishing video to be dropping very soon. I hope to have some big fish to show you guys, or fish in general to show you guys that we can break down in later videos. But thank you guys so much for watching. Take care, Ted Lines. God bless. Pursue your passion. And if you guys are going fishing soon, get your stuff ready. Pick up some of these largemouth baits. Go catch some big fish. Catch you next time.